We begin this episode on a bus to a spelling mistake. That's supposed to be May City, like the month. Don't you just love English? The bus is transporting the passengers from the steamer the rest of the way to the city, and that includes the insurance girls who begged Vash to let them follow him. Or at least Millie did.
If we don't come with you, we can't do our job! I'll hate you! I'll haunt you and your children and your children's children too!
Once again, Millie is a lot smarter than she seems. They mention later that she grew up in a farmhouse in the boonies as the youngest in an enormous family, so she's completely oblivious to world-wise matters like how much a plant costs or what a man of the cloth means.
Do you make pretty dresses?
Hardly. I'm a priest.
But she's incredibly intelligent and a great judge of character. This is the second time she's faked crying to try and garner sympathy, actually.
The chief is gonna get mad at us for not doing our job again.
You're not really crying, are you?
Anyway,
She's frequently compared to Vash because of these traits, and like Vash, will suffer the most heartbreak for her purity down the line. Sorry, that was kind of dark. Well look, a continuity error! The bus hasn't picked up Wolfwood just yet, but you can clearly see the Punisher he packs around strapped atop the vehicle. Hooray for reusing footage where it doesn't belong. Well, Vash finally sees a sparkle on the horizon and calls the driver's attention to a dehydrated Wolfwood.
That is one heck of a well-prepared dead guy. Hey, you.
Ha! Well, praise the Lord. Hello.
So we get the title here, Murder Machine, and I'm going to throw a wee hypothesis out there. I don't think this title is actually referring to the robots in this episode. After all, they don't kill anybody. This new character we've met, however, just food for thought.
I'm alive again. I'm much obliged.
Speaking of which, it's high time I bring up the voice actors for this unusual priest. Now, the term they use for Wolfwood's job description is bokushi, which just means the most generic term for preacher you can come up with. Usually Protestant, but it can really be used for anything. And I don't think the writers know enough about Christianity to get any more specific anyway, as he both recognizes confessional and the concept of karma. So we'll just call him a Christian as the Japanese understand the religion, which is about as generic and mildly inaccurate as our Hollywood recognition of Buddhism is. He's played in Japanese by Sho Hayami, known for eloquent, smooth-tongued snake charmers like Aizen in Bleach, Ashram in Lotus War, and Dr. Muraki from Descendants of Darkness, who was so disturbingly distinct that he's the only thing people really remember about the show. In fact, he's very articulate and sophisticated in all his roles, which makes this really unusual. He plays Wolfwood in a thick Kansai accent, which, as I mentioned before, is sort of like hick Japanese. This is not, however, Hayami's normal register. He speaks much more like a Tokyo dweller in many of his other more well-mannered roles. For this show, he didn't even have to audition. He was simply cast as Wolfwood because he grew up in Osaka, and the director said he wanted an Osaka native with good acting skills to play the character, even if he had to fake the accent, which Hayami did. Now, remember that Vash's seiyuu, Masaya Onosaka, does have a thick Kansai accent, and he was told to hide it and try to sound more formal. And now, Sho Hayami, who grew up in Osaka but doesn't really sound like it, was told to speak in Kansai Ben. There's even more irony to be had, though. The mangaka said he wrote Wolfwood in heavy Kansai Ben to stand in for a thick southwestern accent in English, which Wolfwood would actually be speaking. Dubbing companies, like ADV in particular, are sometimes criticized for casting Osakan characters as Southern hicks in an English dub, like in Azumanga Daioh or Abe Nabashi. But in this case, the author's intent really was for him to have a thick Southern accent in English. And they didn't give him one. English VA Jeff Nimoy just sounds mildly Midwestern with a lot of color in his voice, almost like an English version of the Kansai Ben. Except for once, that wasn't the intention. Oh, who cares, he sounds great.
Yeah. So down the road from here, so I thought I'd just hoof it.
Jeff Nimoy hasn't done much voice work and is mostly known for adaptive writing on shows like Digimon, Zatch Bell, Naruto, and a little GTO, where he got to play fast and loose and have more fun with the translations than most adaptive writers, whether you love that sort of thing or hate it. He's played a few other parts, but Wolfwood is by far his biggest role and probably always will be, as he auditioned for it before getting work mostly as a writer.
Hey, I'm alive because of what you did. How can I ever thank you, Mr.
I am known as Valentinez Alcalinella Zihak Shushira Boherets. Gambigo Bella, Blue Stradivari, Talentrent Pierre, Andre Chartenhemos, Riccardo Vinci, Baldos George, Deutzel Kaiser III. Don't hesitate to call.
Millie calls him out on the ridiculous alias, and Wolfwood is stunned to find himself face to face with Gunsmoke's most wanted man.
If I shot you dead right now and collected the 60 billion double dollars, I'd have a really fun journey, wouldn't I?
You weren't listening, were you?
Got any more water?
I would, but you drank it all.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Hey, they seem to be getting along really well.
Oh no. God made two of them! On a more serious note, these two really are birds of a feather, but also total foils to each other. The idea of them being exactly the same and still polar opposites is going to be a huge factor in upcoming episodes. At the moment, however, Wolfwood is broke and dangerously close to getting kicked off the bus, so he offers the driver a portable confessional as compensation.
You must have something to confess. Some blasphemous act, an indiscretion maybe? It's on the house. Go ahead, don't be shy.
Right, stop that! Silly!
Vash asks if that's a normal part of Wolfwood's gospel, and the Padre admits that it's strictly a business venture he came up with to make more money for the orphanage he runs. The church alone wasn't bringing in enough funds to take care of the kids, so he decided to go on the road for a while to make it all up on his own.
Are you saying you make money as a priest?
Well, I wouldn't exactly put it like that, but...
If only Wolfwood had finished that sentence. I'll elaborate more on that in a second, but first there's this key scene with the orphans where Wolfwood gives away nearly all his pithy food supply to some hungry kids. He really likes children. No, not in that way. Be civil, guys. But as we'll soon discover, he has little patience for anyone else. Not only that, but this scene is also noteworthy for breaking up the stereotype normally associated with priests and monks in anime, that they're falsely upright Stepford smilers who really only care about money and sex. Wolfwood certainly starts looking like this at his introduction, but his discussion with Vash about caring for dozens of orphans when he can't even afford to feed himself, and then proving it with his actions, helps break that up some.
Well, I'll be. I'm actually surprised that you can smile like that.
Huh? What do you mean?
You had me kind of worried. I noticed that you always smile and seem really friendly, but the way you smiled was so empty it hurt to watch you. You're hurting like crazy on the inside, yet you grin and bear it. At least that's this man's opinion anyway.
Wolfwood is now the first character to have really seen right through Vash, making these two kindred spirits of sorts from this point on when Vash returns the favor in the near future. Still, this begs the question for rewatchers, does Wolfwood know, and how much does he know about what Vash really is? Spoiler time, sorry. His earlier line, and his luggage,
Well, I wouldn't exactly put it like that, but...
implies that he's still working as an assassin, but if I could throw a guess in, I don't think he knows about knives yet, and I don't think he's been given his mission as a successor to the gung-ho guns. I really think he's just being sensitive to Vash's circumstances here because they are so much alike. Why? Well, you'll find out in the next episode where we quite literally get 2 seconds worth of hints as to when Wolfwood will land on Knives' payroll. I don't think it's happened yet. I think he's still just on the outside taking jobs from Chapel and has no idea what Vash really is. Spoiler time over to any newbies, that was probably all kinds of confusing. Speaking of confusion, the passengers panic when they realize one of their number, Eric, has been shot in the shoulder. Not only that, but it's some sort of laser scorching instead of a bullet wound. I actually don't feel sorry for him, and I'll explain why after we meet what shot him. Millie immediately blames Vash, not the newcomer Wolfwood, which is kind of interesting, don't you think? But Vash replies,
It was no mortal that did this.
Come again? What the hell is that? That thing is huge!
Wolfwood actually swears copiously in both language versions, which should be another big tip-off that he's not a normal priest. They all pile into the bus and floor it as the robots close in behind them. The bus driver calls them haunts of lost technology. Vash seems to know exactly what they are and finds it surprising that they're still operational, and their behavior is extremely off. This means both that they're extremely old, like Vash, and acting counter to their programming. What are they programmed to do? Well, just wait for it. Maybe they're not acting counter to their programming. They start to tend to the wounded man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, kitty.
Good to know I can always count on you there, J-Dub. Then they realize one of the girls Wolfwood met earlier has been taken by the robots. They have the same reaction,
Take care of the wounded man!
Oh, dear.
but the girls do not. Did you notice that despite being on opposite sides from them, Meryl looks at Vash when he jumps out the window, and Millie looks at Wolfwood? Wolfwood then realizes he doesn't have anything to fight with, looking back at the bus in dismay. Why? Did he bring weapons? Well, we'll find out later, but for now, Vesh lends him a knife. But you can never replace boot knife.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling.
So the two of them go after the robots. Vash warns Wolfwood that the sensors on their noses detect heat, so they'll have to be still.
Oh, this is bad.
Wolfwood's not a great listener, I guess, as evidenced by his reaction to this adorably cheery deathbot.
You may not enter this area.
Huh?
You will now be removed by force.
Wouldn't it be great if all executioners were that polite? Vash covers for Wolf's sorry ass, and they race after the captive girl. You'll notice that the robot isn't hurting her or attacking the two. In fact, it appears to just be running away. Either way, they shoot it down and are about to rescue the girl when the desert suddenly flushes them.
Oh, no, it's quicksand!
What an embarrassing way to go.
They land inside, of all things, a spaceship, and Vash says it must have crashed over 100 years ago. Now, there's another significant dub change here, and it's a flat-out error, unlike the somewhat arguable change in Episode 5. Vash calls this an alien ship, and I think the translators just sort of made a mistake in assuming that this was like a UFO, as episodes where it's explained to us that these are human vessels won't come up for a long time yet. Now, this is a little problem, because it leads us to assume for a while that Vash is an alien, since he knows what the robots and ship are, and then he calls it an alien ship. Nope, it's just a dub error. This is a spaceship from Earth that crashed. Not that Vash is human either, but it's still misleading. Wolfwood and Vash decide to shut down the robots and find an escape route, and Vash tells Wolfwood to cover for him while he makes his way to the controls.
Hey, I have to tell you, I've never fired a gun before.
Bull Loney.
You lie! You lie!
It's hard to say if Wolfwood tries very hard to keep his preacher facade or not, and to the best of what I can tell, it's not entirely a facade. His mentor was an opportunistic legalist, so he sort of combines his assassin detail with his religious beliefs, and therefore just has a very business-like understanding of faith, as illustrated by his goofy prayer here.
May you go with the protection and love of Almighty God. It's the usual mantra for the big guy.
Does it work?
That's entirely up to you.
Wonderful mantra you got there.
Wolfwood seems to simply believe that God helps those who help themselves. But that's not all. We learn more about his philosophy as the series goes on. Anyway, Wolfwood is an excellent shot, but eventually runs out of bullets and finds himself cornered by a deathbot just as Vash is cut off by one too. He braces himself for a quick annihilation when...
What happened there? Huh? Hey, Vash?
Somehow both robots were destroyed, and Vash's left arm is smoldering, but seemingly unharmed. But we won't find out why until episode 12. Oh, Trigun does love keeping secrets, but it's about to solve one mystery for us, so pay attention.
You can stop now. There's no one left to protect.
So these robots were created simply to protect people, and even though the dub flubs, they were made to protect humans. Take that into account and flash back to their behavior throughout this episode. They attacked this Eric person and took away the little girl, Helen. Which can only mean that Eric was actually trying to harm Helen or do God knows what to her, who's to say. Bet you never thought of it that way before, huh? And after that, they chase after the bus. Although Millie does shoot one of them, it sort of bounces harmlessly off. I have to wonder if they weren't trying to return the little girl or just investigate who these humans were, since they've been masterless for over a century. Then Wolfwood attacks them, and they don't immediately attack back, but first confirm that he doesn't have an ID and tell him to leave or be removed by force. The robot carrying the girl doesn't attack them or harm her, but just retreats, and at the end of it all, Vash does seem sympathetic to the robots, entering a console to shut them off and bidding them
Good night.
This really puts that title Murder Machine in perspective, and given the series' dual message of humanity is beautiful and humanity is scum, I have to wonder if Murder Machine really isn't pertaining to Wolfwood, who by meeting Vash has alerted Chapel, and therefore Knives, therefore Legato, of his whereabouts after 20 years of searching, and setting up what will be the tragic second half of the series. Anyway, Meryl and Millie bust them out, and bust them up, really, and everyone gets back on the bus.
I'd much rather lead an uneventful life if it was up to me.
You couldn't if you tried.
Huh?
That's pretty ominous, actually. And again, it calls into question how much Wolfwood does and doesn't know about Vash. But even if he knows everything about the guns, knives, the whole conspiracy, I don't